Welcome back to Hannity. It's more than a year away, but pundits on both sides of the aisles are speculating who will throw their hats into the ring for 2016. And according to a new CNN poll, so far things are looking good for former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. He received nearly a quarter of support from Republicans polled, coming in 10 points ahead of his closest competitor, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. And to talk about this, joining me now to break everything down, our Fox News contributor Guy Benson, Democratic strategist Brian Benjamin, and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. Now, Guy, I'm going to go to you because you always get called a rhino for supporting people like Jeb Bush and Chris Christie. Is this just a matter of name recognition, or do you think that Jeb Bush actually has a shot at winning the primary in the GOP process?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The first part of your question is right. This is absolutely name recognition. And we see this also when Mitt Romney's name gets thrown into these poll questions. He ends up at or near the top when people respond because, let's face it, most normal people aren't going to even start thinking about the election for a very, very long time. So a pollster mentions a name that they recognize, someone that they've heard of, and they're inclined to go in that direction now. There has not been a single vote cast, not a single debate, not a single campaign event for anyone yet. So I know that we in the pundit world love this stuff like crack cocaine, these early polls, but they mean nothing.
Yeah,
they mean nothing to normal
people. You said we're not normal people, Guy. What do you mean we're not normal? I mean, come on.
We're sort of not.
We're sort of not. That's true. Leslie, to you, is this, when Jeb Bush comes to the top of a poll like this and then you see Hillary Clinton still winning by 13 points, even with Jeb Bush at the top, does that make Democrats happy?
Oh, yeah, it makes us very happy. And, Guy, I got to talk to you about that crack habit later, I guess, but because I couldn't relate. But I have to tell you, this is, again, I do agree with the Guy on this. This is name recognition. And also, for the few that it might be not just about name recognition, we're looking at Christie is definitely more to the left and more moderate than Jeb Bush, and definitely more explosive and not as politically correct to a degree as a candidate. I have to say, though, Katie, I've always said that Jeb Bush was the name that scared me the most up against Hillary. And I think if we look at past polls, she has a double-digit lead over some, but I think that's a smaller gap when we look at the latest polls with her and Jeb Bush. So I'm happy, but I'm more worried with the Jeb Bush than I am with Chris Christie.
Oh, you think he's going to win. So, Brian, you are a Democratic strategist.
I didn't think win presidency, but I didn't win out with the presidency.
Yeah, that's true. How do you, look, you're looking at the people who are getting a lot of the money, the people with the establishment type names, the name recognition. How are we starting early? It's not just Republicans. Democratic strategists are also looking at who is polling well now, even though it doesn't matter to all the normal people, as Guy says. How do you start getting your machines ready to take on a Jeb Bush or a Chris Christie, because it looks like they're going to be getting into the race?
Well, the question is, can they get through the Republican primary? And I don't believe that they can. If you look at Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, you look at the conservatism of that base, either Jeb Bush and Chris Christie are going to have to move to the right like Romney did, or try to avoid them like Giuliani did. Both didn't work out so well for each. So I think it's going to be Rand Paul or one of these other folks who might rise to the top. But obviously, we're caught up in the name recognition, as Guy mentioned.
Right. Well, I want to give Guy the last word on the political topic here. The CNN poll was interesting to me because Dr. Ben Carson came in ahead of Rand Paul. And I know that we're early, but I thought that considering Rand Paul has a lot more name recognition, his father obviously ran for president a couple of times. What do you think about the grassroots aspect of this?
Well, these numbers will shift 1,000 times in the next couple months. But look, Ben Carson is someone that a lot of people, including myself, really admire. I mean, he's a world-class pediatric neurosurgeon who's brilliant. His life story is incredible. A lot of grassroots activists have heard him speak at events across the country, and they say, wow, what a refreshing, intelligent guy. Whether he can cut it in the deep water, right, the deep end of the pool, when this really gets going, remains to be seen. But it's obvious why he has some appeal for a lot of people.
Well, now we're going to move on to a more local issue here in New York City. Of course, you had the funeral of Officer Ramos this weekend. You had thousands, not hundreds, thousands of NYPD officers turning their backs on Mayor Bill de Blasio for some incendiary comments he made before the police officers were executed. Leslie, Al Sharpton is still in the picture. He's been to the White House 80+ times. The president hasn't condoned him or condemned him for any of what he's been saying, the things that maybe he's been inciting throughout this process. What do you think about that? Is it a good idea to have the president keeping Al Sharpton around?
Well, I don't think the president should just have an Al Sharpton around, but I think as president, with all that's going on throughout the country right now, and the great divide, it would seem, or the perception of divide between some of the African American community, and actually not just African Americans, but people who are angry and have a lack of trust in some areas of police, and that needs to change going forward for the best interest of our nation and for safety in our cities. But Al Sharpton is a community, leader in the African American community, even though he may be self-proclaimed. A lot of people back him for that, and I think he has to sit down with the president and with people like Bill de Blasio, but you have to have the police and the police presence and somebody representing both sides. That's the only way anything is going to change going forward.
Well, Brian, you think that it's not fair to accuse the Obama administration as a whole of being anti-police just because Al Sharpton happens to visit the White House?
Of course. I mean, you can't compare the two, but I do think, I want to get your incendiary comment. Al Sharpton said he was, donating money to the families of the police officers.
Okay.
That's number one. No, hold on. And number two, he said, killing of any innocent blood is not accepted. So he's been very clear in terms of where he stands.
I mean, he's said those things post. He's definitely said those things post. I would argue that the Obama administration has a track record of being anti-police. President Obama nominated a man who advocated for one of America's most infamous cop killers to head the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. President Obama's track record with police is not a good one. Eric Holder's track record with police is not a good one. This administration certainly backs up what Al Sharpton thinks. But we have to go. Thank you all so much for